The last thing I gave away was his name. I was kneeling on the kitchen floor at 3 a.m. with my ear pressed against the radio. A young woman was laughing inside it. She was laughing at something a man had just said to her. I knew the sound of him. I knew the exact length of the pause he left before the end of a joke. I knew that she would reach over and touch his wrist when he finished. I could not find what he was called, so I asked, out loud, into the static, like a woman with nothing left to lose. What's his name? The laughing stopped. The static went flat and perfectly silent, the way a room goes quiet when somebody in it hears a door open. And the young woman said, "Who's there?" I opened my mouth to tell her, and I could not remember that either. My name is Eleanor Sharp. I am 74 years old, and I have lived alone in this house for 6 of them. People assume the dead stay where you leave them. Mine came back on a frequency. Nobody tells you that silence has a texture, that it settles differently in a house where 2 people used to argue about the thermostat. I built a routine the way you build a splint. Tea at 7, the blue cup, never the green one, the crossword, which I never finished and never threw away. His radio stayed on the counter where he left it, a brown plastic thing with a cracked dial and a dent in the casing from the summer he dropped it off the porch. I never turned it on. I never moved it either. 6 years, and I dusted around it like a headstone. Then, in October, I woke at 3:14 in the morning, not from a dream, from sound. A thin hiss coming up through the floor, the way water sounds inside a wall. I went down. The radio was on. The knob was still turned to off, as far as off would go. The little amber light behind the numbers was glowing anyway. Static. I stood in the doorway with my hand flat on the frame and listened to nothing for a long while. And then the nothing organized itself. A woman's voice, warm and close, mid-sentence, as though she had been talking the whole time and I had only just arrived. She was telling somebody about a dress she couldn't afford. She was laughing at herself for wanting it. Then she said the small, ridiculous phrase I have used my entire life when I'm embarrassed. I have never once heard it from outside my own mouth. I knew that voice. I had simply never heard it from the other side of a room. It was mine, younger by 40 years, and happier than I have ever been able to remember being. Underneath it, faint, a man answered her. I did not scream. I did not run. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down in the dark and listened to myself be happy until the sun came up and the static thinned into nothing. That is the part you need to understand before I tell you the rest. Nobody made me stay. When I went back upstairs that morning, I stood at the foot of my own bed for a long time, because I could not remember which side of it had been mine. I want to be precise about this part because I have had a long time to lie about it. It took 4 nights to become a habit, not 4 weeks, 4 nights. The second night, I carried a chair to the counter. The third night, I moved the chair closer. By the fourth, I had stopped pretending I intended to sleep. I lay in the dark with my eyes open, listening to the clock, waiting for 3:14 the way you wait for a train. It always came. It never came early. At first, the echoes were nothing at all. A grocery list, her complaining about her mother, which made me laugh out loud, alone, at 3 in the morning, because I had forgotten I ever complained about my mother. Then the radio gave me the house. Not a story about the house. The house. I heard our footsteps on bare floorboards. I heard the particular ring an empty room makes before anyone has put anything into it. And I heard myself, 34 years old and frightened, saying we couldn't afford it. Saying it twice. Saying it the way you say a thing you want to be argued out of. And he argued me out of it. He said the light in the kitchen was worth the money. He said we would be old here. I was sitting in that kitchen when he said it. Same window, same light, 40 years thinner. Nothing warned me. There was no bargain offered, no terms read aloud. The house simply began taking things, and it was careful, and it started with what I would not miss until I reached for it. The pharmacy was the first time. A form on a clipboard, a pen on a chain, a young man behind the counter waiting politely. My hand went down to the line and stopped. I knew my name. I want that understood. But my hand had forgotten the shape of it. I stood there long enough that he asked whether I was all right, and I laughed and said something about my glasses, and then I wrote. What came out was Eleanor Pike. Pike. I had not been Pike since 1971. I looked at my maiden name in my own handwriting, in loops I had stopped making before my daughter was born, and I understood that something in me had been turned back like a clock. I sat in my own driveway for 20 minutes. Then I went inside and waited for 3:14. That is the sentence I would take back if I were allowed one. Not the listening, the waiting. The echoes got better as I got worse. I don't believe that was a coincidence. I believe it was a price list. On the 9th night, it gave me an anniversary. I couldn't tell you which. An early one. Her voice still had the quickness that goes out of a person after a certain amount of living. They were at the kitchen table. He was telling her quietly, the way men of that generation said serious things, that he had been afraid his whole life and had only realized it once he stopped. She didn't answer for a long while. Then she said his name, just his name. And I sat in the dark on the other side of 40 years and could not have given you a single letter of it. Ask me what I traded, and I couldn't hand you an inventory. That's what makes it so clean. You never notice a room getting darker. You notice that you have stopped being able to read. There is a photograph on my mantel of a woman in her 40s on a beach, squinting, holding her sandals. I picked it up on a Tuesday afternoon and looked at her a long time. I could have described her to you. Brown hair going gray at one temple, a gap between her front teeth, a stubborn chin she did not get from me. Everything was there except the thing that is supposed to happen in your chest. I knew she was my daughter the way you know a fact you have read somewhere. Her name is Diane. I had to turn the frame over to be certain. She called that Sunday the way she does, and I talked with her for 35 minutes, and she noticed nothing, because I have been her mother for 50 years, and I know the shape of that conversation the way you know a hymn. I said the right things in the right places. I asked after the right people. When she hung up, I sat holding the phone until the tone started. That was the night I began leaving myself notes. Index cards, blue ink, block capitals so there could be no argument. One on the mantel, propped against the photograph. This is Diane. She is your daughter. She calls on Sundays. One taped to the bathroom mirror with my name and the year. One inside the front door, listing the people I was permitted to let in. I wrote 9 cards that evening. I was thorough. I was calm. I thought, being extremely sensible about the whole thing. And then at 3:14, I went down the stairs into the kitchen, and I put my hand on that cracked brown dial, and I turned it up. The cards held for 11 days. I want to say that I was careful. I was careful. Careful is not the same thing as strong. I came down before dawn on a Thursday to check them, the way I had every morning. 9 cards. I had written 9. I counted 10. The extra one was taped beside the radio. Blue ink. My handwriting, not block capitals. It was written in the loops I stopped making in 1971. 2 words. Come down. I would like to tell you I was frightened. I was not frightened. I was invited. That night the room did not wait for me to reach it. I woke at 3:14 and the smell arrived up the stairs before I did. Wet paint, sawdust, and the cold mineral smell a house has before anybody has cooked in it. The kitchen had no curtains. The floor was bare boards. My table was gone. My chairs were gone. There was nothing in that room but the radio and a long rectangle of streetlight where my window used to be. I knelt down. My knees are 74 years old, and they did not want to. I put my ear against the casing, and it was warm, the way a thing is warm when somebody has just been holding it. Inside, a young woman was laughing. She was laughing at something a man had said to her. I knew the sound of him. I knew the exact length of the pause he left before the end of a joke. I could not find what he was called, so I asked, "What's his name?" The laughing stopped. The static went flat and perfectly silent, and she said, "Who's there?" I opened my mouth to tell her my name. It was not there. And then something came up out of me, the way a splinter works its way out after 40 years. Eleanor Pike. And the young woman inside the radio said, warmly, without a trace of fear, "That's my name." Here is the thing I have never once said out loud. I could have stood up. The dial was under my hand, 2 inches, a quarter turn. I have thought about those 2 inches every day since, and I have never been able to pretend I did not know they were there. Then the man spoke. He said her name, the one she had just taken from me, and he said it the way a person says a word they have said 10,000 times and still mean. and she answered him. And kneeling there on the bare floor of a house I had bought and paid off and buried a husband out of, I finally understood what I was. Not haunted, not chosen, not taken. I was a woman selling off everything she had, one piece at a time, to stay in a room where somebody said her name like that. I did not turn it off. I leaned closer. I make coffee at 7, 2 cups. I take mine to the chair by the front window, and I leave the other one on the counter, and I have stopped pretending I don't know who it's for. It isn't for him. That's the part people would get wrong. It's for her. I am not better. I want to be honest about that, because there is a version of this where I tell you I got help, and I got well, and the house went quiet, and not one word of it would be true. What I have is an arrangement. I don't go into the kitchen between 3 and 4 in the morning. I sleep in the front room now, with the door open and the hall light on. I still have my cards, 9 of them. I had them laminated, which I know is a ridiculous thing to do, but blue ink runs, and I have learned not to trust anything that can be altered. Diane still calls on Sundays. I still know the shape of the conversation. Some mornings I look at her photograph and something happens in my chest. Some mornings it doesn't. I have stopped trying to predict which kind of morning it will be. That is the whole of my recovery. I sit down, I drink my coffee, I let the day arrive. The house is very quiet now, quieter than it was when he was alive, quieter than it was after. Some days I sit in this chair for an hour without a single thought crossing me, and I have come to think of that as a kindness. The radio is in the living room. I did not carry it in here. It has been sitting on the small table beside the lamp for 11 days. I have not touched it. It has not made a sound. But this morning, over the top of my cup, I watched the needle move. Not quickly, a hair at a time, the way a minute hand moves. You never see it going, only that it has gone. It is sliding down the band patiently toward a number I would know anywhere. There is no sound at all. The cord is lying on the floor. It has not been plugged in since October. I did not get up. I did not call anyone. I sat where I was, with both hands around a warm cup, and I let it look for me. I noticed.